Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. Putting America first, second, and third. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show. It's Wednesday, June 12th, 2013, hump day, middle of the weekday, starting that long, slow glide down to Powwow on a Friday. A lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, 800-313-9443. Manny is sitting in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Obviously, the big story continues to be this massive global spy operation conducted by the United States government in defiance of not only the Constitution of the United States of America, in defiance of international law. There is no way they can spin this, that this is somehow legal, certainly with regard to other countries. It is spying. And spies are supposed to be put up against a wall and shot, unless they're Israeli spies working here in the United States, and then they get sent back home. But that's a whole different story here. We are seeing all these stories around the world. The Independent is now coming on board on this thing, saying, are there more revelations to come? Of course there are. The NSA and FBI and CIA, they don't want all of their secrets out there. They want all of your secrets. They think you should not have any secrets at all. You should be completely exposed, staked out, naked on the ground so they can keep an eye on you. But their secrets, they've got to keep their secrets. They've got to keep their secrets. You're not allowed to know what the government is doing with all that money they take from you here. And, of course, the U.S. government is continuing to rage that Edward Snowden is a traitor. Well, that term only applies in time of war, giving aid and comfort to the enemy. And so apparently the United States government has decided they are at war with the American people. We are their enemy. And, of course, anybody who exposes government wrongdoing to the American people is therefore a traitor to the government and the state, which not only includes Edward Snowden, but anybody operating in either the corporate or independent media who is trying to report on government wrongdoing, which is supposed to be the traditional role of the media, either corporate or independent. That's why we got that First Amendment, freedom of the press, to have the freedom to report on government wrongdoing. But in the government's mind, of course, anybody who does that is a traitor, and they have to be disappeared, and they have to be... And we're hearing all this nonsense going on. Now, at this point, going after Snowden with a drone strike or something is rather pointless. It's an act of revenge. Whatever information he was going to give out to members of the media is already out there. You're not going to stop it by going after Snowden. In fact, all going after Snowden's going to do is make him a martyr to the cause here. The only reason you go after somebody covertly with an assassination is to prevent them from doing something, and that's too late in the case of Snowden. And by the way, isn't it amazing that with all this total surveillance of all Americans, the NSA didn't realize one of their own was getting ready to blow the whistle? Kind of makes you wonder if this whole system works at all. Certainly Boston bombing proves that it didn't in the context of preventing terrorism here. Now, over at warsacrime.org, they have an interesting story about how NSA whistleblowing is a strong tradition. And it absolutely is. And they're going back over all these times when the NSA has been caught openly, flagrantly violating the United States Constitution, and people inside would say, this is unacceptable, and they would blow the whistle. This is not the first time. What is really different about Snowden's case, because we have had all this information all along, the NSA is reaching into our computers and reading our emails, and we've known all this for a long time. It's most Americans were able to pretend that it wasn't going on because they were law-abiding citizens. This revelation woke America up. You can be the most perfect, loyal American citizen. The government is still spying on you, and that is outrageous. And it should be, and you should be very angry. We will be right back. Hello, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're continuing about the NSA, CIA, FBI, EIEIO spy scandal against law-abiding people around the world. And there's an interesting story over on Washington's blog where an NSA official has basically candidly said that the government is not trying to protect their surveillance secrets from terrorists, because we know there aren't really any, they're all phonies out there. It is working as hard as they can to protect knowledge of what the government is doing from the people of the United States of America. And that is not what the United States is supposed to be about. I understand secrecy in time of war to protect your secrets from the enemy, but this is the government protecting itself from you as the government goes on violating the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And apparently the White House has issued a statement. They have no intentions of limiting or curtailing or shutting down this spy program. They're basically standing up there and saying, we're going to go on defying the Bill of Rights, and you can't do anything about it, huh? What do you think you can do to us for violating that Constitution, huh? We're the government. We're above the law. The laws are for you serfs. You have to obey the law. We don't. That's the attitude we're seeing coming out of Washington, D.C. This NSA spying operation has violated 5 of the 10 amendments in the Bill of Rights. The First Amendment, because Occupy protesters, law-abiding Occupy protesters, were being targeted for tracking, for speaking out against the private central bank. They violated the Fourth Amendment, prohibition against unreasonable search and seizure and confiscation of your personal property, meaning your data, absent probable cause and a proper warrant. They violated the Fifth Amendment because they are taking your personal property, meaning your computer time and internet connection time, to use for their purposes without just compensation. They violated the Ninth Amendment by declaring that your rights that you already have for other means of communication don't apply to computers. And they violated the 10th Amendment simply by virtue of that previous decision. Because the 10th Amendment says if the Constitution doesn't say you're allowed to do it, you are not allowed to do it. We have a government that is openly contemptuous of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the rule of law. And they're standing up there and saying, ha, what are you going to do about it? You're just 300 million people. You can't do a thing to stop us. And they're making that same statement to the rest of the world. We're going to go on spying on all your people inside your country, and you can't do a thing about it. That may rapidly change. Over in Russia, they're passing a law against all government workers using any of these compromised social media systems. Facebook, Google, anything. You are not allowed to use them. I have no doubt Russia is already setting up their own internal social media to be kept disconnected, and probably every country on earth is already looking at that. People are going to be setting up their own local, domestic social network to make sure it's not being spied on by the U.S. government. But the arrogance on display here, and it's already having a negative effect. Obama's staunchest supporters are enraged. They're turning away from him. The ACLU has dropped support for him. That means support for Obama's domestic agenda is crumbling out from underneath him. And of course, this NSA spy operation has enraged all these countries the U.S. was depending on for logistical and political support for these continuing wars of aggression to bring the blessings of private central banking to the entire world. And so the fallout from this is, it's already being felt. It's already kneecapping this war agenda, this dollarification, this enforced return to Bretton Woods are all suffering because of this. Now we're seeing these articles about how America is outraged over Edward Snowden. No, it's the American government that's ticked off. They don't like it when their wrongdoing is made public. They're acting like spoiled children who got caught with their hand in the cookie jar, only it's your cookie jar. And they're trying to find somebody else to blame. Oh, it was Bobby's fault because he told on me. It was China's fault because they let him stay there for a while. They really are acting like 6-year-old kids out there right now. Meanwhile, the founder of Home Depot is out there saying, we should throw Edward Snowden a party. We ought to be grateful. And I am. And again, not to put too much focus on him because that's going to make him a target. The information about this spying has been out here in the independent media for years. and years. But most Americans who are wandering around saying, I don't need to know, I'm not breaking the law, I don't have to worry about the government spying on me, and guess what? You are being spied on. Your phone calls are being monitored. Your emails and texts read. Photos and videos you send through the internet are being looked at. All your downloads are being recorded. Your FTPs, your online ordering. Everything about you is being saved. And you should be offended. Because that information, even if you are obeying the law, we all have private aspects of our lives that we don't want to have made public. And that information could be used to blackmail and coerce us, not just us, the American people, members of Congress. Remember, we were talking about yesterday how J. Edgar Hoover, when he was running the FBI, was legendary for his private secret files that he used to blackmail members of Congress and even presidents, including John F. Kennedy. Hoover had information about some of John F. Kennedy's extramarital affairs, and he used those to coerce Kennedy into keeping him as head of the FBI. Remember back when the whole Monica Lewinsky Whitewater scandal was blowing up, and it came out that somebody had succeeded in recording the phone sessions between Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky, the phone sex sessions. Clinton's in the White House, Monica Lewinsky was living in the Watergate. Somebody got that on tape and used it to coerce Bill Clinton into ordering the FBI to cease the search for Israel's top mole inside the administration, codenamed Mega. A lot of people think it was Rahm Emanuel. So these things go on. Whoever is in charge of all of this information has the ability to blackmail and coerce the government to go the way they want to. And I'll tell you right now, it's not for the benefit of the people. Or they wouldn't be keeping it secret. They'd be standing up there and saying, we got the goods on all your congressmen and president, and we're going to make sure they do their job. We're going to make sure they conform to the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. We're going to make sure they bring that private central bank to heel. You don't hear any of that out there. It's all bad Snowden, and you don't have any right to look into how we're spying on you. But you don't have a right to privacy. We can't trust you with guns, but you should trust the government with your private data. We would never do wrong. We're the government. We're above reproach in a pig's eye. Now, we talked earlier in the week about some of these back doors that the government has been building into computer systems. We talked about the NSA key that was found in Windows NT, and then later a similar key found in Windows 2000. There's a story out here over on Blacklisted News that this backdooring of Windows operating systems, and we may presume they've done the same thing to Macintosh, to Apple, and maybe even some of the pre-packaged, pre-compiled Linux distributions by now. But it goes all the way back to Windows 95 is when they started putting in backdoors. So they can come into your computer, steal your computer cycles you paid for, steal your electricity that's running the computer at the time, steal your part of your internet access time, especially for those of you on metered plans, and use it for their own purposes without just compensation. We're back to that Fifth Amendment violation. So they've been doing this all along, and those of us paying attention knew about it. But this scandal woke America up, because most Americans do see themselves as law-abiding citizens. They're struggling to do the best they can under the crushing burden of debt, lost jobs, skyrocketing taxes, strangling regulatory compliance. They're doing the best they can. And as hard as they are working to try and get by and play by the rules, they are outraged that the government still doesn't trust them. The government still sees them as potential terrorists. And they are angry. People are looking back over the last 6 years and remembering all the little sexy messages and photos they sent to their significant other. They're remembering all the little business deals they were negotiating with their partners that suddenly seemed to evaporate for no reason at all when the competition came in with a slightly lower bid. And they're starting to realize they are all victims of a government which provably cannot be trusted with your private data, but insists on having it anyway, and says that anybody who questions that policy is a traitor or a terrorist. Remember, we've actually had brochures put out by the FBI informing local police departments that anybody who talks about the Constitution and the Bill of Rights has to be reported as a potential terrorist suspect. Remember that story about the graduation? The valedictorian gets up to make his speech, mentions the Constitution, they pull the cord on the microphone. Don't want him telling those students there's still a Constitution and a Bill of Rights out there. The government has hit the panic button. They are trying to slam the gate on this prison they have built for the American people before the American people stampede back out of that corral. The race is on. And we see it every single day. Remember, the fastest way to bring down a dictatorship is to force them to act like one where everybody can see it. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we will be right back. Hello, America. Welcome back to the show. And with regard to that last commercial, I'd like to remind everybody the Republic Broadcasting Network is still in the middle of their little fundraising drive, the 1,000 Ounce of Silver drive. We need your help to keep on the air, to reach a larger audience. This NSA spy scandal has resulted in a lot of Americans waking up and starting to ask the important questions. We need your help to lead them to find the answers. We're going to go to the phones. George in Texas. Aloha, George. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How you doing, Mike? You know, the other thing that has me concerned about with the NSA spying and snooping, and probably a lot of people will be let out of prison over this, and this is, you know, the federal government has a 98% conviction rate, and the federal prosecutors have the notion of win at all costs. I would like to know, has the NSA spying snooping resulted in surveilling privileged information between an attorney and their client on a defense side?
It's already happened. It's already happened. We have a story we posted to whatreallyhappened.com. It's a translation from a European article in which a lawyer had his visa revoked because of conversations he was having with his client over one of the social media sites. There was another story about a woman who was trying to come to the United States of America, and her visa was revoked, and she was put on a plane back home, and the people questioning her showed her a printout of all of her Facebook posts for the last couple of months. And so we're already seeing these abuses of this data.
Yeah, I mean, but you know, the thing is, the most important thing is if the Department of Justice is using the NSA to spy on attorney privileged information that's attorney and client privilege, that's the grounds for a mistrial if it can be proved. And a lot of people in prison should be let out. I mean, you're looking at tampering of witnesses, intimidation, using this NSA spy grid.
Exactly. I mean, going on to IRS Gate, you know, they're starting to ramp up this investigation about how the IRS stole all these private medical records of the American people. And so from the government's point of view, attorney-client privilege doesn't exist. Doctor-patient privilege no longer exists, especially under Obamacare. All your medical records are going to be on these computer systems, and probably those computers are tied in with the NSA's data mining operation. It's this whole total informational awareness, and all of it is unconstitutional. It's like the abuses we saw with the census. The Constitution says the census merely counts heads to allocate congressional districts, and all this other information about, you know, your political leanings or your sexual orientation or your medical, what prescription medicines, all the rest of that stuff is completely unconstitutional. This government thinks it is immune from the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And that means it is an illegal government, it is an unlawful government, it is an unconstitutional government, it is an illegitimate government.
Well, you say if they're spying on us to try to, intimidate us, I believe right now people are no longer afraid or just getting angry. I think like you said, the fatigue of being scared is over, and I just think people are just getting angry now.
I think you're absolutely right.
Well, thank you, Mike.
All right. Thanks.
I posted a story to the website about this, so... Okay, thank you.
I'll keep a lookout for that one. All right, we're getting from over here, this is reported from the Trenches World Report, ACLU has now filed a lawsuit challenging the constitutionality of this entire NSA spy operation against law-abiding American citizens. And they're seeking a remedy of, first of all, having it immediately halted and all of the collected data destroyed. This is going to go all the way to the United States Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court is going to have a real hard time, no matter how much blackmail information the NSA has on those judges. They're going to have a real hard time trying to somehow say this doesn't violate the Fourth Amendment, and the Fifth Amendment, and the First Amendment, blah, 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 blah. They're going to have a real hard time selling that. And even if the Supreme Court issues an order to the government to destroy all the data, does anybody here really think they're going to do it? With this attitude on display that they are above the laws, the NSA sees itself as much above the law as the Federal Reserve System does. Remember, we have Alan Greenspan on video saying the Federal Reserve is answerable to no federal government authority. They see themselves as above the law. Clearly, so does the NSA. They probably use the Bill of Rights for toilet paper over there. I have another article over here. Activists post 86 civil liberties groups and internet companies demand an end to the NSA spying. People are angry about this. And remember yesterday we were talking about how the corporate media, lackeys, were trying to put out these polls saying, oh, the majority of Americans are perfectly happy with this. In fact, many Americans think the NSA should be allowed to go further. And I'm not the only one who was saying bull biscuits about this. I saw a lot of other articles and a lot of other websites saying this is simply not believable. And again, don't take the corporate media's word for this, because after all, they lied to you about Saddam's weapons of mass destruction. Don't even take my word for it. Spend time going out everywhere you go. Supermarket, garage, bus stop, whatever. Talk with other people about what's going on and see what their reaction is. I haven't found a single person who thought this was okay. Not one. Going to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the show here. We just had a caller off air saying that the evidence collected by the NSA should not be destroyed so we can find out who was spied on. They seem to be missing the point. Everybody is being spied on. Every single person with a telephone, with a computer, with a tablet. Everybody is being spied on. That's the scandal. We don't need a list of names. And if the NSA were going to release a list of names of people who were spied on, it wouldn't be complete. They would say, well, we spied on this guy and he was a known terror suspect, so we were okay to look at him, and we spied on this person because he said bad things about the president, and that was justified. The only remedy is that being asked for in some of these class action lawsuits. Shut it down, format all the hard drives. That's it. Absolutely scrape out that building in terms of zeros and ones. Turn it into a giant public library, or a public backup resource for anybody who wants to trust somebody else to be taking care of their data. Now, over at Investment Watch blog, they have a story which is really telling just how bad this scandal is for the U.S. government. The rest of the world is absolutely disgusted with the U.S. Big Brother spying methods, and you need to understand, whatever legal fiction the government claims to have where they can ignore the Fourth Amendment with regard to American people, they have zero jurisdiction in foreign countries. The United States government is breaking the laws against spying and surveillance on law-abiding citizens. Other countries have the same rules that the Constitution does. There must be a warrant and probable cause before you can look into their private lives. Even Putin is out there saying that's what they have in Russia. They are not allowed to listen to anybody's phone call without probable cause and a proper paperwork, due diligence. And so, for everybody in Russia that the United States NSA is surveilling, they are breaking Russian law. They're breaking French law. They're breaking British law. They're breaking German law. This is a vast global criminal operation to extract data that might be useful for blackmail and coercion or insider trading. It's a huge problem. When you've got everybody's business information, who's making deals with who has a new product coming out, you can make vast amounts of money on insider trading. And don't tell me the NSA would never do it. I've lost count of the number of people inside the government who've been prosecuted for insider trading on the basis of information they get through these meetings. We had this scandal just last week where all these hundreds of health department workers and White House staffers were given advance notice of a Medicare change that was going to send insurance companies' stocks right through the roof. And you just know they went over to their broker and said, buy some stock in blah, blah, blah company. Because it's happening. For every one they actually catch, for everyone that is actually prosecuted, you know there's 100 that went undetected. Because the government isn't looking to find corruption and crime within its own government. They're out there trying to find something that they can beat you over the head with to get you to go back to being an obedient little worker, an obedient little taxpayer, an obedient little breeder of soldiers for these wars to bring the blessings of private central banking to the rest of the world. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the show, Russia is considering making it a crime for any of their government workers to use Gmail, Facebook, or any other of these social media systems that are known to be compromised by the NSA. And knowing that those systems are wide open to U.S. and Israeli spying, I don't blame them one bit. Over at 12160.info, Colleen Rowley is writing that massive spying on Americans is outrageous. And it is. Now, Colleen was an FBI special agent for 24 years, legal counsel to the FBI field office in Minneapolis, and she's a whistleblower, and she's out there saying, yes, this is not law enforcement. This is intimidation. That's what this whole spying, we're watching everything you do, was always about. Intimidating you, keeping you silent, keeping you isolated, scaring you into just going along with this devolving into tyranny. Obviously, it's not working. Everybody's angry now. As that caller referred to, there's only so long that government can successfully use fear to keep a population under control. Because you keep them afraid long enough, eventually the fear burns out. There's a specific neurotransmitter in the brain that signals, I am afraid. But it's in limited supply. And when you reach a point where you've simply burned all of that neurotransmitter out and your body can't rebuild it fast enough, you literally lose the ability to be afraid. And at that point, all that's left is rage and anger. And as I pointed out on the show yesterday, we evolved to feel rage and anger for a reason. It is essential to our survival. It's essential to protect us as a community against those who would do harm against us and our families. It's there for a reason. You should embrace that rage and that anger. It will keep you free. It will keep you alive. Or it'll keep your families and your community protected. Now, as I said before, where this is really blowing up in the government's face is where members of Congress are realizing they, too, are being spied on. And we knew this even before the NSA story broke, because back when we were looking at DOJ-gate, where the Department of Justice was going out and grabbing the phone records of everybody at Associated Press, not suspected individuals for whom probable cause existed and a warrant was issued, they simply said, give us everybody's phone records, and they got phone records of the phones inside the Congress itself. And that was enraging. And now with NSA-gate, every member of Congress is realizing they're spied on too. Their phone records, their email, their texts. And they're angry. You don't get to be in Congress without stepping on a few toes. And they're furious about it. Now, they're holding closed-door briefings. Obviously, they're talking about things that you, the hoi polloi, the worker bees, the serfs, the plebes, you're not allowed to know what's going on. But I'll bet you the NSA is getting a very chilly reception inside Congress. And I'm sure the NSA's in there saying, well, just so that you know, we don't really spy on you guys. You know, we draw a line in society, and everybody above that line isn't spied on. That's why we didn't arrest any of those Wall Street fraudsters, because they're immune from surveillance, and all of you are immune from surveillance. We're only spying on regular working Americans who might be kind of unhappy with the way this country has been going. So you're safe. Or they may simply go in there and say, yeah, we're spying on all of you. We got the goods on every one of you. We know every one of your mistresses. We know every one of your arrests in your past. We know how you lied about blah, blah, blah. And we'll just make it public if you try and stop us. And again, this is not just Barack Obama who did this. This has been going on for years. Echelon was cranking up back when Clinton was in office. This whole NSA program and PRISM started under George W. Bush. This is a systemic problem with the government as a whole. A government that absolutely has come to believe they should not have to abide by the Constitution, but you ordinary Americans, you'd better follow every single little tiny law that we put out there, or you'll be in trouble. We'll send the Infernal Revenue Service after you, or we'll kick down your door. Over at Investment Watch blog, more talk about class action lawsuit against Obama, PRISM, America Online, Apple, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, Paltalk, Skype, Yahoo, and YouTube. Ever notice who's not on that list? Or on any of these lists of compromised systems that are directly feeding data to the NSA? Megaphone. You remember Megaphone? This was that social networking system set up by the Israeli government, where they have all of Israel's minions in this country, and they've got this little megaphone icon, and anytime any one of them sees somebody being critical of Israel, they'll post it in this little megaphone window. It pops up on the screen of every one of Israel's supporters, and they all jump on, come into the blog and say, oh, you're an anti-Semite, you're a Jew hater, you love Hitler, blah, 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 blah. That's a social networking site. But it seems to not have been included in that list of all of the social networking being monitored by the NSA. Kind of makes you think, doesn't it? Especially in light of all those Israeli companies that got these juicy contracts to set up this whole system for the NSA. Now, over at Washington Blog, another story about the fact that metadata is not as harmless as you're being led to believe by the corporate media. And it's referring to a study by MIT a few years back that found out that traffic analysis of the social networking contacts alone could determine your sexual orientation and various other aspects. Apparently, they're identifying mistresses. That's how they used, supposedly identified the mistress of CIA Director David Petraeus to drive him out of office. And that right there is a perfect example of how this system can be used for political gain. It was not illegal for Petraeus to have an affair. In fact, if having an affair was grounds for dismissal, half of Washington, D.C. would be gone by now. But he refused to take the blame for Benghazi. Obama wanted him out, and they said, oh, let's just go back and look at all this data the NSA has saved on Petraeus, and oh my goodness, he's got a mistress, doesn't he? Well, we'll just use that to kick him out. And that is another reason why this government cannot be trusted with your personal data. It's got nothing to do with crime. It's got nothing to do with law enforcement or counterterrorism. It's all about finding things that can be used to coerce you into going along with the tyrant. And in any event, this idea that they're only saving the metadata is absolutely unsupportable. And I'm alarmed at how many people who, even as they denounce the NSA phone scanning system, after all the years the NSA lied about its existence, and they seem all too ready to take the NSA's word that only the metadata was being saved. And this is absurd, as we've mentioned before. The NSA's got a call from here to there. Unless they have the content, they don't know if it was a misdial or a misconnect or a simple wrong number or kids playing with the buttons on the phone because that's what mommy and daddy do. Absent the content, the data being saved by the NSA on phone calls is not 100% reliable. Now, as I pointed out earlier, there are 3 billion phone calls made in the United States every single day. If we stipulate it takes 1 kilobyte of data to save that metadata frame, who is calling who, then the amount of storage required for every single phone call in America going back 7 years is just 7.6 quadrillion bytes of data, which sounds like a lot, but it's only 1 billionth of the amount of storage they have in that Utah facility. Okay, that's a lot of waste. Even for the U.S. government, that's a lot of waste. So I went back and I did some more calculations. The average length of a telephone call in the United States is 3 minutes, 15 seconds. sampled at 8,000 cycles per second and a 16-bit sample size. That creates an MP3 file a little under 200 kilobytes in size. So together with the metadata, let's round it up to an even 200 kilobytes for simplicity's sake. Times 3 billion phone calls a day, times 365 days per year, times 7 years, yields a storage requirement to save every single phone call made in America for the last 7 years of 1.5 quintillion bytes. If we expand it to every phone call in the whole world for every day of those last 7 years, that comes to 6.2 quintillion bytes needed. Let's add 20% overhead for indexing and organization so they can find the individual calls, and we get 7.4 quintillion bytes of data. It's still just a tiny fraction of the advertised septillion byte size of the Utah facility. That Utah facility is 5 times the size of the U.S. Capitol building. There is no question this Utah facility has the capability of saving and recording every single phone call made on planet Earth for the last 7 years, with lots and lots of room left over for other things like your credit card purchases, or your voting record, or your medical records, or your DNA profile, or embarrassing, compromising photos they think might be useful. And we know this septillion byte size facility is getting full because they just started building a new one in Maryland. So this idea that they're only saving the metadata, that's completely inconsistent with the scale of these facilities being built. Huge amounts of money going into these things at a time when Americans are going hungry, sleeping in alleys, losing their businesses, losing their homes. The roads are crumbling. The bridges are collapsing. It's amazing stuff here. All right, we're going to grab a phone call here. John in Texas. Aloha, John. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. I just wanted to call up and say real quick that earlier y'all were talking about from Windows 95 to Windows 8, there were back doors put in it so the government can look into, to whatever you're doing. Well, that's exactly true. I've been a computer technician now for about 15 years, and this is something your listeners are going to want to hear because some of them are probably having the same problem. When you log on to RBN Radio, I remove the same 60 viruses every day. The same 60, and these are not malware or excuse me. These are not like worms or Trojans. These are spyware and malware. They are the same companies that release these viruses. So every day before I log on, my computer starts slowing down, and then I run my software. After I run my software, I remove the same 60 viruses every time.
Let me clarify what's going on there. RBN, like what really happened, we do have advertisers on our site, and a lot of those advertisers will plant things on your computer. Not all of it is intended to conduct evil. A lot of this is just marketing tracking stuff. But we do know the bad guys are trying to break into websites all the time. In fact, I had to fend off a denial of service attack earlier in this morning, and yesterday I caught somebody literally trying to hack into my server. And so the idea is they're trying to get onto all of the independent Patriot websites to try and cause as much trouble as possible, so you'll get disgusted and fed up and you'll go back to ABC's website or NBC's website or CBS's website. Right now the government is in a panic. There is no dirty trick they will not do if they think they can get away with it right now. And that's just a reality of what we're dealing with. And so advice to everybody is you got to become computer security experts. You got to take care of your stuff. The government wants to shut down any computer that is not 100% loyal to the U.S. government. We got to take a break for commercials. We will be right back. America, welcome back to the show here. And with all due respect to John, he says he's been a computer expert for 15 years. I've actually been working with computers since the mid-1970s, and I just went over to RBN's website, and I did not get any flags. and I've got, as you can imagine, I've got pretty robust computer security over here. There is an aspect about malware that you may need to be aware of, and maybe John has this and does not know it, and it's called hijackware. And it's a piece of malware that sits on your computer and waits for you to go out to websites, and then it will insert new things into that website stream that are not on the original server, including additional advertising and potential malware. And I've had a lot of people write me and say, how come you're running this porn ad on whatreallyhappened.com? And of course, we don't have porn ads on whatreallyhappened.com. People's machines are infected with the hijackware, which will add things to the stream going to your browser, and you will see things on that web page that were not on the original server. And I think that may be what John is dealing with, because again, I just went over to the RBN website and I did not get any warnings or flags about anything going on over there. So wanted to clarify that, what's going on. And hijackware is big business, because they make money going out to people and saying, we will hijack computer users' browsers and put your ads in there in place of the ones that the website owner put up there. And it's just another way of cheating the system. And the NSA isn't doing anything about that either, even though, in theory, PRISM has all that data on who is doing it. Now, interesting article over in silverdoctors.com where they're talking about how every society that descended into dictatorship engaged in mass surveillance of the people and always sold it as necessary for the safety of the people. Whether it was Nazi Germany, Soviet Union, the East German Stasi, yes, we're watching everything that you do, but really it's for your safety. And we're hearing that again today. Oh, all this phone spying is necessary to protect you from terrorism. Tell that to the people of Boston, if you believe the official story, and obviously I don't. And I know there's a new push to put out there the fact that the official story of the Boston bombing is the bombs were in black nylon backpacks. They have shown the photos of the remnants of the backpacks with the bombs, and yet the photos of Dzhokhar Tsarnaev show him with a light gray backpack. So we know they were lying about that. There was a bomb drill going on. Somebody used it to set off a real bomb. Oh, blame the Tsarnaev brothers, blame the Muslims, blame whatever. It was another false flag. There's no question it was a false flag. This government needs enemies to wave at you to secure your obedience. And when the Soviet Union collapsed, they were in a panic. They didn't want to lose all that Cold War money that they love to play with. They needed a new enemy. Oh, there's a war on drugs. There's a war on terror. There's a war on this. And they're trying to, oh, Muslims, be afraid of Muslims. It used to be commies. We were all being said, oh, the commies are coming to get you if you don't do what we tell you. Now it's the Muslims are coming to get you if you don't do what we tell you. Fool me once. We'll be right back. America, welcome back to the show here. We're still spending time on the NSA scandal. I am going to get off of it because there's a bunch of other stories that have accumulated over the last few days we do need to get into. Interestingly enough, a member at whatreallyhappened.com just posted a video of Brit Humey's out there saying, oh, this concern over NSA spy, it's misplaced hysteria. You people are just being silly, being upset about the government peeking at everything that you do. I mean, how picky, how petty you all are that we're watching everything that you do. We believe we're doing it with the very best of intentions. Yeah, that's what the Stasi was saying. That's what KGB and GRU was saying. That's what the Gestapo was saying here. Now, a good measure of just how much this story is getting traction with the American public is indicated by George Orwell's 1984, because sales of that book have just exploded. Sales of 1984 over at Amazon spiked 7,000% over the normal trend. So people are going back to read that book. Now, Orwell wrote that book as a warning to future generations about what could happen when the government decides that it doesn't have to obey the laws, and that for the good of the nation, meaning the government itself, they could just do whatever they wanted to do. And the parallels between 1984 and our current situation are obvious. We're being spied on by all of our appliances, our phones, now our TVs. We have torture. We have a manufactured enemy for the 2-minute hate called Al-Qaeda, on which all bad things are blamed, and why we must always be in a constant state of war. Orwell called it. He absolutely did. Now, an interesting story over at the Examiner. Apparently, a fellow blogger, peace activist, Tom Francois, has been openly critical of President Obama's policies. He has a very strong presence on Twitter. That's his platform of choice. And like myself, he occasionally likes to use Photoshop to make some editorial cartoons. Now, he has never directly threatened the president in any way, manner, or form. And yet, apparently on April 11th, the police and the Secret Service showed up at his house and demanded to see everything and demanded he sign a consent form to review his medical and mental health records and whether he'd ever traveled to Washington, D.C. Now, when the Secret Service was checking us out during Obama's last Christmas vacation, they were a lot more subtle about it. You know, they can look at my medical and mental health records. There are very, very few because I stay away from those doctors and their prescription horrors. They actually sent somebody out to the Feeding the Hungry program that my wife and I work at, as we're handing out bread and stuff to the people destroyed by the economy. The guy's trying to find out if we're a threat to the president, which is okay. We made him carry all the heavy stuff. Anyway, interesting article over at Blacklisted News, the dirty little secret about mass surveillance. It doesn't keep the people safe. We know that from Boston, if you believe the official story. Didn't stop Boston, didn't stop Fort Hood, didn't stop the crotch bomber, didn't stop any of this stuff. Now, I'm of the opinion, because of the eyewitness testimony of how the crotch bomber was walked around security at that airport, that it was a false flag event to remind us there's terror out there. You've got to be afraid. You've got to do what the government says to be safe. I think they've worn that one out. They're not going to get much traction with that stuff anymore. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, as we reported on Monday, the New York Times and the Washington Post had put out these ridiculous polls showing that Americans were overwhelmingly okay with the government spying on everything that they did, and a significant percentage said the NSA should be allowed to do even more than they're doing now, and the reaction around the world was basically, oh, come on now, and possibly stung by that rebuke. The polls are now being reported as shifting. CBS has come out with a poll now saying 60% of Americans are opposed to this, and I would suspect probably they got numbers even higher than that. We just started our own poll over at whatreallyhappened.com. Do you approve on the U.S. government spying on you? Yes or no? And so we'll get some numbers out of that. But they're trying to basically adjust and adapt. And again, it's all these trial balloons. We're going to trial that, we'll put out a trial balloon. Most Americans are in favor of this. Well, that failed. Let's come back and say, more, about half and half or split. It's all public relations and trial balloons. And as I said, the more of these little silly trial balloons they put out there, the more it diffuses the message of the propaganda. They're losing the narrative, and that's why modern propaganda doesn't work, because it's all trial and error. There's no continuity of story. They've lost the narrative on this whole thing. Little funny footnote to all of this. You know that NSA Prism logo that's all over their letterhead and their websites and everything else? It turns out the Prism itself is a copyrighted image from another website that the NSA just grabbed and used without permission. It's one more reminder. They think they are above the law. Laws, that's for the serfs to follow. We've returned to the Middle Ages. The nobility don't have to follow the law. We have rights. We are allowed to go out and steal and kill and everything. You serfs, you must obey the law. Remember the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution. The laws are supposed to apply to everybody equally, and that includes the National Security Agency, or the No Scruples Agency, depending upon whatever you want to say about it here. Now, I put a link to a product announcement by Symantec about a new mobile encryption system for your smartphone. This one's aimed at the iPhone. And there's a lot of products out there. Oh, yes, you can secure your messages over the iPhone back and forth. And I posted this not because I think you should get it, because I'm going to tell you in a few minutes why you shouldn't. But Fox News was running a big story about it. Oh, all these encryption applications on the phone. Terrorists could use these, and we can't let the terrorists get a chance on this. But, you know, real terrorists, real criminals, Wall Street insider tradings are not going to use any off-the-shelf encryption because the NSA already knows the method of how they work. As I've said before, one more reminder, there are 2 steps to reading encrypted messages. First, you have to find the method, how the encryption works. Then you need to determine the key for a specific message. Of the 2 parts of the process, finding the method is far more difficult. The Allies did not break the German Enigma machine until they actually captured one. Then they could figure it out. So the U.S. government wants you to buy and use standard encryption, in which they already know the method and can then brute force your keys with those acres and acres of supercomputers the NSA owns. That's why they tried to force DES on everybody until it was proven insecure, and they found the work reduction packet, which was your encryption key embedded in the message to make it easier to read. Then there was the Clipper chip they wanted everybody to use. And that was shown to be deliberately weakened. In fact, even before the work reduction packet, critics were saying DES was designed for the government to break because they mandated limits to the key length. DES can become incredibly secure if you have gigantic keys, and the government said, no, you will not use a key longer than this. The very first digital cell phones had encryption in there so that people with scanners couldn't hear your phone calls. And it was a 16-bit key, which is not particularly strong. But for the first 3 years, those phones were out. The high order 8 bits, the top 8 bits, were always set to 0. So that a brute force search for the key only took 1/256th as long as having to search the entire 16-bit key, so that anybody with the appropriate hardware could basically plug into your conversation by pushing a button. So the government wants you to use standard encryption, whether it's PGP or anything else, because they already know the method. And if they've got the method, finding the key is very, very easy. If you have something to hide from the government, and apparently now we all do, if you're a drug trafficker, or a Wall Street inside trader, or you're a congressman accepting a bribe, then you need to invest some time in learning how to program computers and develop your own code system. And it doesn't even have to be all that strong. It just has to be different from what the NSA is used to dealing with. And if 1 million Americans all have and use their own private methods of encryption, the NSA, for all their computer power, will be overwhelmed trying to figure them all out. You don't have to come up with a code that's stronger than what the NSA is using and used to. You just have to come up with something different so that they're taking up all their time and resources trying to figure out the method. And then they finally get the method and say, yee-haw, we've broken the code and we found the key and it's a recipe for chocolate chip cookies. Now, over at Washington Post, they've been running the story about how the United States, they're trying to find reasons to say all this NSA stuff is working and we found this bomber, and already the British government is saying, no, we didn't find this bomber because of NSA, we just found him through regular police work. And so there's this story at the Washington Post about how the United States succeeded in disrupting Al-Qaeda's online magazine, and they've delayed the publication of the latest issue of Insight. And it's another piece of propaganda to show that, yes, we're using this NSA stuff for good purposes. But Inspire is a propaganda front itself. It exists to wave at you to say, oh, those evil Muslims, they're publishing terror magazines, and you've got to be scared of them. But we know Inspire is a fake, because issue number 10 featured on the cover Adam Gadon, the American Al-Qaeda. And we know Adam Gadon is a fake. His real name is Adam Perlman. He's the grandson of one of the founding directors of the ADL. Even his FBI wanted poster lists his real name, Adam Perlman. He's a phony, and if Inspire is featuring him on the cover, they are phony as well. They're just wagging evil Muslims at you to try you to go along with this whole NSA thing again. Now, interesting story. This came out of RINF.com regarding a Homeland Security-funded training exercise in Boston dubbed Operation Urban Shield. And it was delayed because of the Boston bombing. But this scenario that they are training for involves this hypothetical terrorist cell dubbed the Free American Citizens. You know, not the jihad this or the holy war that or Muslim. The target of this training exercise is a terror cell dubbed the Free American Citizens. And it's another indication of how the Department of Homeland Security characterizes law-abiding, freedom-loving, constitutional Americans as domestic extremists. Oh, you talk about the Constitution, you're an extremist! Only terrorist-loving extremists talk about that Fourth Amendment and the First Amendment. How dare you! Now, getting over to IRS Gate, and I did mention this before, the House is now starting to look into the IRS seizure of 60 million medical records from American citizens, to which they were not legally entitled. And it's another reminder how these various agencies, and in this case a private collection corporation for the privately owned Federal Reserve, are simply stealing your data anytime they can get away with it. They aren't entitled to this information. And we were reporting earlier in the week about how the IRS is, going out and data mining your Facebook accounts. They're going out for your credit card records, for your online purchases. All of this a violation of the Fourth Amendment. Now then, let's talk about the economy right now. We've just got this story out of Press TV. America's manufacturing growth has hit a 4-year low. And the reason this is a problem is the manufacturing growth is not keeping up with the population growth, especially with all these new instant citizens coming across the border. We're not manufacturing enough to supply the needs of the growing American population, so our imports are actually increasing. And it is a reminder, if the U.S. government continues to push this war agenda, this government will lose. The United States was able to prevail in big mistake number 1 and big mistake number 2 because at that time they were a manufacturing powerhouse. The United States led the world in manufacturing engines and bearings and cars and trucks and appliances. All of those factories could be converted to war material virtually overnight. But today, many of our factories are rusted, empty hulks. They've been shut down, the machinery sold off or sold to other foreign companies or sold simply for scrap. You can't just walk in, throw on a switch, and start manufacturing again. The United States doesn't have the manufacturing it had during those last wars. It doesn't have the money. It doesn't even have the manpower, even with all those newly created citizens they're trying to have with the amnesty program. And lacking those 3 M's, money, manufacturing, and manpower, the United States will lose any prolonged ground war. They're already running into trouble in Afghanistan and Iraq. And that's why, if we let this thing go any further, somewhere between this moment and final capitulation by the United States government, they will start turning those little brass keys in the silos, and it's going to be a bad day for anybody not wearing 2 million sunblock. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And I'm looking at the online poll that we put up on government spying, and so far, as usual, the numbers are overwhelmingly. It's 98%. No, I do not approve of the U.S. government spying on everything that you do. We got 4 yes votes, which I presume are from the government types who monitor this website and this broadcast on behalf of various government agencies in the White House. So greetings to our friends in national surveillance. We know you're out there, and we include you in our audience numbers for the purpose of generating advertising revenues. So thanks for tuning in. Anyway, I just had this thought, before we get on to the economy, I had this weird thought. We always talk about the oath to the Constitution, the one recited by the President. I promise to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. You notice the word obey or comply is not in there? Talk about your ultimate weasel word. Yes, I'll protect that piece of paper. Doesn't mean I got to do what it says. We got you now, suckers. I want to go off on a tangent here. And this is directed to all the videographers out there. And this is an unsolicited endorsement of something. If you go back and you look at that video that I made for Claire's Music, Help to Make the World a Better Place, there's a little bit of camera shake in there. And the reason is I was using a very inexpensive Steadicam rig that wasn't really very good. And I just got hold of a new one. And it really wasn't that expensive. And it's called Flycam. Now, you got to be careful because there are two Flycams out there, one of which is a cable-supported camera, and that's not what I'm talking about. But you can get this Flycam from places like eBay and Amazon, and it's very, very good. It took me about 15 minutes to assemble it and get it all trimmed up, and it's as good as anything you're going to see in Hollywood. So if you're a videographer and you do a lot of handheld, you might want to look at the Flycam, because I'm very impressed. By the way, made in India. Go figure. All right, let's talk about the economy here. Over at moneynews.com, they've got Jeffrey Hirsch is out there saying the economy is poised for deceleration. That's the new word. They always want to come up with a new word for how bad things are getting because they don't want you to have those unfortunate, negative, emotional connotations with the old words for when things go bad. They don't want to use the word depression again. So they'll say, well, this is a recession. And it's the same thing. The economy is in the Al-Qaeda, but it's a different word, so you don't feel quite so bad about it. Well, now they've overused recession. They've overused downturn. So the new word is deceleration. The economy is decelerating. It's a depression. We've already gone past all of the negative economic indicators of the 1930s. We are in a depression. Stop trying to sugarcoat it. Anyway, PIMCO is out there saying there is a 60% chance of a global recession in 3 to 5 years. I think we're in one right now. All of the positive growth and indicators are just instant money creation by the central banks trying to prop up a failed system. And they can't keep that up. They're not going to be able to keep it up for 3 years. I'll tell you that right now. Okay, now in the world of financial rigging, and a reminder that all of these bankers and financial people are in fact criminals who are offered a get-out-of-jail-free card by a corrupted U.S. government. We had that whole LIBOR rigging scandal that came along, and then all of this other interbank stuff, and now there's a new one. It turns out, and tip of the hat to Matt Taibbi over at Rolling Stone one more time, the foreign exchange currency markets, the FX, are being rigged. This is a $4.7 trillion a day market, and it too is being rigged by the banks to just reap huge profits off of other people's work. Because when you're talking $4.7 trillion a day, you only have to shift those exchange rates by a fraction of a percentage to just skim off vast amounts of wealth. And all of this wealth is going to these riggers for which nothing of value is returned to society. That's the real scandal. I mean, if they were doing something that benefited the world, like good roads, good schools, good hospitals, good bridges, we wouldn't complain about the money they make for themselves. But in this case, all of these riggings going on by the financial centers are extracting real wealth from the nation while returning nothing of any value whatsoever. And apparently what is going on is that this rigging in the FX market, the foreign exchange market, was found over at WM Reuters. And they shoved through trades during this 60-second window when the benchmarks are being set and nobody's looking at the trades that happen during that window. And that's where the rigging is going on. And the Financial Conduct Authority over in Britain is looking at opening a probe into this latest scandal. They're investigating LIBOR. They're trying to investigate the gold and silver price rigging. They simply moved that from England to France to get away from that investigation. They are all criminals. Even in Wall Street, they admit, 25% of everything we do is a fraud. Deal with it. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking about financial matters, the economy, and the outright fraud, the epidemic of financial fraud that is being used to make the 1% that much richer at our expense. And a government that, as intent as it is on spying on every little tiny thing that you do, is completely unconcerned about Wall Street fraud, because Wall Street's very generous in sharing a piece of the action with the boys over on Capitol Hill. We give them a campaign donation. They're going to let us do what we do. Apparently, AIG Financial Products, which is the derivatives unit that almost destroyed their company in 2008, is being investigated again over allegations it failed to properly measure and manage risk, intentionally misled supervisors and investors, and lacked appropriate checks to limit outsized risk-taking. We know this has been going on. It's a big problem for the derivatives industry as a whole. Now, a derivative, and let's talk about the credit default swaps, because that's the big problem. Credit default swap is like an insurance policy. I invest 5 million quatlus in your business, but I don't want to lose it all if you go bust. So I buy a credit default swap against my investment, so that if you go belly up, I go back to the company that sold the credit default swap and say, give me back most of my quatlus. And that's how it works. But unlike regular insurance, you can insure other people's investments. See, if I own a home, I can buy fire insurance on it. I can't buy fire insurance on my neighbor's home. Certainly gives me motive to go over there with a can of gasoline and a match sometime in the middle of the night. But derivatives are unregulated. In fact, Obama apparently just gave the heave-ho to one of his administration officials who wanted more regulation on derivatives. And in regular insurance, companies that sell fire insurance are required by law to keep cash reserves on hand so that they can pay the expected number of claims that will come in. Derivatives and credit default swaps don't have that requirement. And what happened in 2008 during this whole real estate boom, mortgage-backed security thing, everybody was selling credit default swaps and putting the money in their pocket, and they were all buying themselves Bugattis and super Rolex, whatever it is, watches that they had out there, $200 hamburgers for lunch. And they weren't keeping cash reserves. They figured they didn't need them. Boom time's always going to be going up. And that's one of the favorite fictions on Wall Street, because the law of gravity does return with a vengeance. And so these companies don't have cash reserves to pay off these claims. Wall Street has sold an estimated 90 trillion, with a T, credit default swaps against Europe's debt, against Europe's financial institutions, the whole Eurozone. And that is why we've got the Federal Reserve is actually pouring money onto all of Europe's banks to keep them afloat. Because if any one of them collapses, if any government defaults, if any nation leaves the Eurozone, it will start triggering those credit default swaps, and it will be a firestorm because Wall Street doesn't have the money to pay. It's a big fraud. AIG being investigated again. Actually, after 2008, they should have been shut down for all the crime and fraud they were guilty of. Oh no, we'll fine them a token amount of money, and they promise they won't do it again, and apparently they're doing it again. The first default in Europe is going to kick off a bunch of dominoes that will land right at the doorways of Wall Street. And we know what those Wall Street guys are going to do. They're going to turn around to the U.S. government and say, please, we need another bailout. We need you to go to the American people and take their gold and take their silver and help us make good, to preserve the reputation and trustworthiness of the American financial system. And we know what the U.S. government is going to do. They're going to say, yes, massa. Yes, massa. We're going to loot the American people so we can make good on all of those credit default swaps that you recklessly sold, and we let you do it by going along with deregulation. That's why they're desperate to get the guns, because after they get the guns, they're coming for your silver and your gold. Apparently, the latest tactic by the gun grabbers is the price of a gun license is going to be raised by 100 times. Yes, you have the right to keep and bear arms as soon as you buy the license from the government, and that now costs more than the gun itself. That's their new strategy. So AIG is once again under investigation by a government, and if they find, when they find wrongdoing, there'll be a wrist slap. Nobody will go to jail. There'll be a token fine, and business will go on as usual. So anyway, the Obama administration has fired Commodity Futures Trading Commission head Gary Gensler for the crime of recommending greater government oversight of the derivatives market. What do you mean, more control over this reckless Wall Street behavior? We can't have that. You're fired. Get out of here. Alrighty, over at RINF.com, concern being raised about U.S. Treasury bonds are already at junk status, regardless of the assurances we're getting from those Wall Street ratings firms. Because after all, those were the same Wall Street ratings firms told us all that those mortgage-backed security bundles were all AAA. And remember how they ducked blame for that whole disaster? They went before Congress and said, well, really, it's just an opinion, and you shouldn't have that much, it's just our opinion, and we were wrong. What did it hurt? Pretty much everybody in the country. Remember, by law, pension funds are only allowed to invest in AAA-rated securities, and a lot of pensions in the United States invested in those fraudulent mortgage bundles. And that's why a lot of pension plans are collapsing. They're defunded. The real value of those pension funds got sucked off into this Wall Street scam. Raising the possibility that all of this papering and quantitative easing aside, that the U.S. is close to defaulting on its sovereign debt. And it asks the question, can you trust the Wall Street credit rating agencies? And of course the answer is no. They work for the financial institutions issuing these offerings. Joe's Bank over here puts out an investment package, and Joe's Bank hires XYZ rating agency to say it's great, and XYZ rating agency says it's great. And Joe's Bank says, see, the rating agency says this is a secure investment. That's how it all worked back in 2008. The one rating agency that sounded the warning was Egan-Jones. And Egan-Jones is a very different sort of creature because it doesn't accept money from the companies issuing the investments. If you wanted Egan-Jones ratings on an investment, you, the investor, paid for it, which meant you got a more honest and accurate report, which is why the SEC has shut Egan-Jones down. They don't want honesty right now. They're dependent on keeping the illusion going on. But it is coming to an end. Even Goldman Sachs is predicting a bond crash. The U.S. has been overprinting Treasury bonds for years to justify the Federal Reserve's quantitative easing. There aren't enough living Americans, including all of these soon-to-be amnestied illegal aliens, to make good on all those Treasury bonds. Those Treasury bonds are pledges against your slave labor. To redeem the Treasury bonds, the government has to take money away from you without giving you anything for it in order to redeem those Treasury bonds. That's the scam. That's your enslavement. And they'll take your money and say, we're protecting you from terrorism, we're fighting global warming. All of these made-up, make-believe things that they'll claim to be spending billions and trillions of dollars on, and it's really just going to the money junkies. When they get a real disaster, like the tornado, like exploding fertilizer plants, like the Gulf oil disaster, like Fukushima, the government can't do a thing about it. They don't know how. They're only effective at solving problems they themselves invent to fool you with. By the way, speaking of fertilizer plant, apparently FEMA has found some technicality under which they are not going to be providing assistance to all of those people in Texas who were harmed by the explosion of the fertilizer plant. We're the Federal Emergency Management Agency. We can't be bothered with you American people having problems. I remember back following the Northridge earthquake out in Southern California, where we lost about half of everything we had. I had 2 SGI workstations in my home. I was working animation and visual effects, and they literally got shaken so hard that it just destroyed all the internal boards. And FEMA was out there, we're here to take care of you, and nobody I know actually got any FEMA money. It was all spent on building that new underground emergency command center underneath the northeast corner of Griffith Park. And if you look at the Hollywood sign today, all that array of antennas and everything up above it, that's mostly that's from the new emergency command post to make sure that we can keep the people under control here. Over in Greece, the financial indicators have taken another downturn. Greece has now been removed from the Eurozone's index of developed countries. They have now been declared, a third world status country in terms of the quality of life and standard of living there. And it just proves all of these bailouts, austerity, it did not work for the nation and the people. It just made the money junkies richer. Things are so bad in Greece. Greece has now had to shut down the public radio television system completely. Just pulled it off the air. Let all the employees go. The employees are currently occupying the building. And this is not actually going to help Greece repay their debts, because there are no private sector jobs for these radio TV employees to go to. So it's more loss of revenue, more public assistance. If you're going to have to be keeping these people alive anyway, let them go back to work for the public TV. But it's shut down. That's provoked riots over there. The Greek people are watching their nation, bit by bit, be strip-mined of anything of real value in service to this artificially created debt by a private central bank issuing all of the public currency as a loan at interest. And the people of Greece understand that a substantial portion of that debt that people like Christine Lagarde say is sacrosanct and must be paid no matter what. The Greek people know a substantial portion of that debt did not arise from taking care of the nation and its people. It came out of this underhanded deal between Goldman Sachs and Papandreou to try and conceal Greece's debt problems under Papandreou with a bunch of currency swaps. Goldman Sachs made a ton of money on commissions on this, and it doubled Greece's debt, but kept it hidden from the people, kept it hidden from the Eurozone. And then when Papandreou left and the new government came in and they saw the real books, they said, oh boy, are we in trouble. So, let's see. I already talked about FEMA denying funds for Texas over there. There's one booming industry here in the United States of America, writing traffic tickets. The revenue from traffic fines has hit a new record. Yes, we can get money for our state government. We just got to go out there and lie in wait, change the signs around. Remember that video we showed the other day where somebody was parked legally and the city truck comes up and puts up a no parking sign, and before that truck even leaves, the cop is writing a no parking ticket on the car. It's not law enforcement. It's not traffic safety. It is pillaging the people. All this civil forfeiture nonsense. It's not about fighting the war on drugs. It's not about fighting crime. It's about finding excuses to take more from the people to prop up a failed governmental system. And we're talking about gun control a while back. There's another story came out of here. Apparently a 72-year-old grandmother shot an intruder into her home. And on this whole gun control issue, setting aside completely the issue of government tyranny, which is kind of hard to do given this NSA scandal, we the people, under the Second Amendment, have a legitimate right to keep and bear arms equal, if not superior, to those in the hands of the criminals. And we know the criminals are getting all these military-style weapons from places like Fast and Furious. You paid for the guns the U.S. government gave to Mexican drug criminals. But you can't have those yourself. Even if you want to pay for them yourself, you're not allowed to have those. We need to give them to the Mexican drug criminals who bring them back into the United States. So, Anyway, now let's talk about Turkey. Even the corporate media is having to cover this. The violence is escalating all over the country. And they're still trying to spin it's all about, this park and all. It's much ado about nothing. No, it isn't. The Turkish people are tired of the inequality that is arising in this society as a result of austerity and predations by private central banking. And they have had it. And it's just flashed all across the country. The violence carried out by the Turkish government is escalating. The Turkish protesters have documented now that the people who were filmed throwing Molotov cocktails, which was all over the news saying, those protesters, look at what they're doing, they're behaving badly. Well, apparently the police officers who were in disguise throwing these Molotov cocktails didn't bother to take off their belts. And you can see the police radio and the guns on perfect display. We've seen this before up in Canada, here in the U.S. When they want to make a legitimate, peaceful protest look bad, they'll send in infiltrators to knock over trash cans and break windows, and they'll tell the media, be at this corner at this time, and there's going to be something spectacular for you to put on the news. Erdogan's out there screaming, no more tolerance, no more tolerance. And he's not only in defiance of his own people, which is not part of the job description, I might add. He's defying the outrage of the international community. And have you noticed this weird little thing where the U.S. is pouring in all these weapons and money and supplies for the struggling Syrian revolution, which is a complete fraud because 95% of the Free Syria Army are not even Syria. But the U.S. is out there, yes, Erdogan is right, just crush down that revolution, crush down those protests, drive them back into their slave pen. And Russia has rightly called the United States on this utter hypocrisy, that this dictator is good and that dictator is bad. And what it all comes down to is dictators with a private central bank, we love them and support them. Dictators without a private central bank, they're the enemy and must be destroyed. And once you understand that this is a major part of the war agenda to force the entire world into the clutches of private central bankers, everything the U.S. does makes sense. There's no more confusion. There's no more scratching your head and saying, why are we supporting a tyrannical government here and supporting a supposed revolution over here? It all comes down to if they have a private central bank issuing the public currency as a loan at interest. The bankers are desperate to complete the plan of complete domination of the world through private central banking. They are the enemy, not the Muslims, not Al-Qaeda, not the Russians, not the Chinese. The private central bankers are the common enemy of all mankind. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we will be. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and finishing up over in Turkey. As you're probably already aware, the Turkish government has succeeded in cleaning out all the protesters in Taksim Square, at least temporarily. I think they're going back in already. Tear gas, bulldozers just crushed over all of the everything that was there and just scraped it out and said, see, the protests are over. And of course, the response is, no, it isn't. Over at the Independent in Great Britain, they're saying it's just made the Turkish people that much angrier. And so this is going to continue to escalate, and it poses a major problem for the United States because Turkey was where they were going to launch the invasion and conquest of Syria to bring those people the blessings of private central banking. And I think the U.S. has already given up on Turkey because they seem to be shifting the emphasis for a ground war down to Jordan. We're hearing that over there. Meanwhile, down in Syria, there's been yet another atrocity committed by the Free Syria Army, by the hired mercenaries. Apparently, they took this teenager, 15-year-old kid, Mohammed Kata, coffee seller. He sells coffee. That's what he does. Hi, I'm making coffee. And they executed him in front of the family as a warning, don't you dare support Assad or we'll come after you. And apparently they shot him in the mouth to kill him. Extraordinarily painful way to go. And again, these acts tell us it's not a genuine popular uprising. You wouldn't have seen Thomas Jefferson and George Washington running around the American colonies killing colonial kids. They needed the support of the population to kick the government out. So when you have this group operating in Syria that is trying to terrorize the general population into submission, it tells you right there it's not a genuine popular uprising over here. Apparently some of these Western-backed militants have now massacred 60 Shia Muslims in eastern Syria. So this idea that this is somehow related to the Muslim threat, blah, blah, it's complete nonsense. Now, British Foreign Secretary William Hague is out there saying that recent military gains by the Syrian government is just going to make the peace talks harder. Not really. It makes it harder only if Hague's agenda is to kick out Assad's government and replace it with their own puppet who will bring the blessings of private central banking, blah, 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 blah. So, we're coming up here on the top of the hour. John Stedmill is going to be joining us in the next hour to talk about the RBN fundraising and how it's going and how much more needs to be done. And again, all of these scandals, Floodgate, Benghazi Gate, DOJ Gate, IRS Gate, EPA Gate, State Gate, all of these things, NSA spying. Americans are waking up and they're asking the important questions. And John's going to be talking about plans by Republic Broadcasting to increase our outreach, to go and get that new audience, to help guide them to where they can find the answers they need to have, to be fully informed so they can make good choices. As Thomas Jefferson says, is the duty of every American. We're going to take a break for station identification. Be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. I'm looking through my email and I see this one, Happy Father's Day, which is a bit of an alarming situation because I don't think I have any children out there. Turned out to be an ad. Come on. There's my pulse rate racing there for a while. Let's see. Interestingly enough, apparently struggling to retroactively justify the spying on all Americans, General Keith Alexander announced at a congressional hearing today they're going to have records showing how this secret surveillance program was critical to disrupting terrorist plots, and they'll be able to fake up these documents, release these documents within a week. Nonsense. We've already had one embarrassment where the United States tried to take credit for thwarting a terror plot in Britain by virtue of this NSA spying, and the British government already came out and said, you guys had nothing to do with it. Our police caught this guy. Of course they're going to lie in these records. They lied about the existence of this spying under oath to Congress 14 times. You think they're going to suddenly tell the truth now? They're trying to come back and say, really, yes, we're doing wrong, we're violating the Constitution, but really, it's all to protect you. No, it isn't, or Boston wouldn't have happened. Every one of these so-called terror arrests that we have seen in this country over the last several years always go back to some FBI informant going out and talking some other patsies into it. Hi, I want to blow up a bus, and I hope I don't burn my lips on the exhaust pipe. But here's some money, and here's some stuff if you'll help me do it. And then the FBI swoops in, they arrest the patsies and say, see, we've stopped another terror attack, and that's why you must always blindly support the Führer as he marches our armies across the world. Blah, 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 blah. At this point, I wouldn't believe anything this government says. That's the new default. They've lost the benefit of the doubt. The burden of proof is on them. I don't care what you say, you better be able to back it up with proof, and I don't mean some piece of paper with a really fancy letterhead on the top. That's not going to cut you any slack. The motto of the United States government is, if at first you don't succeed, lie, lie again. Because it's all they know how to do. This government can't tell the truth. They are trapped. They're imprisoned by the accumulated burden of the lies from the last 100 years. They can't become honest now without destroying themselves. They have to maintain all those lies from previous administrations. Because the government operates like a religion. It survives on the faith of the masses, on your belief. They have a doctrine of federal government infallibility, like the Pope does. That's why they come down hard on anybody who proves the government is not only fallible, they're criminal. That's why they're going after Snowden. How dare you challenge the doctrine of federal government infallibility? How dare you challenge the doctrine of Wall Street infallibility and Federal Reserve infallibility? You're not allowed to do that. First Amendment. Don't be ridiculous. Just because we recognize your right to freedom of speech, you should have the good sense not to use it. A lot of people making a big stink over these girls in the Israeli Defense Forces who made some videos of themselves scantily clad. Oh, how dare they? I don't know why they're making a big deal about it. First of all, the girls are kind of hot. And frankly, from my point of view, it's the least offensive thing the IDF are doing right now. Have this twisted mentality. It's okay to go out and kill innocent people, but you'd better behave yourself to prove that we're a just and moral people. Anyway, much ado about nothing. We'll be right back with John Stedmiller. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And joining us at the microphone is John Stedmiller, the capo de tutti capi of all of us here at Republic Broadcasting. And John, I know we're not on Arbitron for RBN, but I imagine our radio audience is surging by the numbers. I know that readership of my website is on the way up. Replays of the podcast from my server are trending upward as well. And so, again, this NSA scandal has awakened Americans to the reality that it isn't just conspiracy theory and it isn't just people with something to hide. The government is spying on all of us in open defiance of the Fourth Amendment. They're starting to ask questions. We here at Republic Broadcasting are trying to get the resources to get out there and reach those Americans and tell them where they can go to find the answers they need. So how's the fundraiser going right now?
Well, we have spilled, let me see, today's the 12th of June. We've spilled 12 days into June, and we're still roughly about $2,500 short. And let me take a few minutes to explain to the listeners of your program why this was important that we get caught up with the bills. We're adding new programming to the network, and we're actually putting a new satellite up. It's called XDS. That's the old Star Guide, ABC Star Guide satellite system. And this is going to give us access to 4,000 radio stations. And I'm going to take an extreme amount of pride being able to go out there and, through this network, rep you, Mike Rivero, and get you on some stick broadcasters out there, because you do a very fine show, and you need that exposure. Larry Pratt is coming on board from Gun Owners of America. Also, Bill Frady, that is sponsored by GOA. He's coming on the network to do a 2-hour show, and we're going to be revamping the lineup a little bit here. You're not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. There's a lot of programs that will not move, but there was some holes in the morning that I held off filling up because we were anticipating this happening. Now, what this is going to mean is there's going to be a lot more traffic to whatreallyhappened.com. There's going to be a whole lot more people listening to Michael Rivero, because, as I said, Mike, you do a great show. I don't know how you can do 3 hours of programming and never even stutter. It still mystifies me.
Coffee. The secret is coffee. Fine Kona coffee. That's what keeps me going.
Fine Kona coffee. Well, and so that's what we're doing. So we've spilled over about 12 days. I haven't really hit it that hard, but we need to get that other $2,500 in the door. And we're doing a few things to shave a little bit more off of the network. You know, Michael, there's about 4 alternative networks that have gone down in the last 5 months, and the other ones out there that I'm watching very closely are not doing well. And there is other rumor with that other real competition that we have up there in Minnesota. There's some stuff going on with that as well. So we're going to be basically the last Mohican standing in the alternative media. And I've been referred to, and I don't know if I like this or not, but the grandfather or of alternative media. I don't know if I like that one or not.
I think we should take that as a positive there. I've heard that applied to me in my field of computer animation. They stick a sign on you that says "old guy," and it's supposed to be a compliment, but I understand yeah.
Yeah. So at any rate, things are going swimmingly well, and I am amazed that we are doing what we're doing with this network in the middle of a damn depression. The economies are not getting any better. matter. Government lying through its teeth. Well, when isn't the government lying to you? But neither here nor there. But in the middle of all this, we're going to be one of the last Mohicans out there, Mr. Rivero, and we are going to kick butt and chew bubblegum, and we're all out of bubblegum. So.
Yeah. Or as my wife likes to say, we're distributing pamphlets and smashing derbies. It's at this point that RBN's low overhead is really going to save us, because a lot of these other networks that started up, they got grandiose plans and they set up huge facilities and they said we're going to be great, and they drowned in their own overhead. And by staying small and staying lean, mean, and green, we're in here for the long haul. And as I like to tell our listeners all the time, all the big money is on the side of the liars, the TV networks, these talk. I mean, some of these salaries for these anchors at these corporate media outlets, you'd be just stunned on how much money they're making to lie to the American people. And the RBN does not get any corporate sponsorships. We don't get any checks from shadowy non-governmental organizations. We don't have any angels out there who will give us tons of money to push a particular agenda. We have a little advertising, but even that's drying up in this economy. The companies that were supporting us, they've hit hard times as well. We rely on you, the public, to recognize how important it is that there remain an independent, unbiased, uncontrolled source of opinion and analysis to help people who are just now starting to wake up to what this country has become, to help them figure out what's going on and how they can best survive the crisis.
Well, and we are in a very unique situation, being one of the last Mohicans standing. There is going to come a time where people are going to absolutely want to know. A lot of people right now, Michael, they don't want any more bad news. They don't want to know how bad things really are. I just ran into this with a guy in one of these big box stores here in Round Rock, Texas. Spending way too much time, not enough employees on the floor. They're cutting costs, cutting lights. I couldn't even see half of the packaging on the shelves. And it was kind of a maddening experience. And finally, after all of this, I said something to the guy, and he goes, well, I don't want any more bad news. I don't want to know about that. And I turned around and looked at him. And you might as well have told me I had a booger hanging out of my nose, because that's how that would affect me. And I turned and I looked at him, and I said, do you have grandchildren? He goes, yes, I do. I said, so you're in action. You don't want to know. You don't want to be in there to change anything. What are you leaving to your grandchildren? And that's when the guy started to sober up a little bit, and he realized that I was not joking with him, and I was just not there to make idle banter. Michael, people, they need a little kick in the derriere. The information has been kept from them. The alarm clock has been on snooze almost all of their lives as far as the mainstream media goes. They don't know enough to even really be concerned. Yeah, they know the economy sucks. It ain't really good. Yeah, there's not that many good jobs out there, but we've been through this before, and they're all telling us, hey, we're going to get through this. The economy will kick back in. No, it's not. But here's the problem. They don't know that. So in this protracted, and this will be a protracted recession/depression, more and more people are going to want to know the real truth. You know, that's because you can handle the truth. I made that moniker up years ago. And it is going to matter to people. And places, shows like yours, you're going to be here. People are going to tune in. Oh, that's Mike Rivero. I got to find out what's going on. This is important. This is what I've been waiting for. We just had our 9th anniversary, Mike. I've been waiting all these years for this situation. It's the perfect storm, and we're gearing up. We're ready.
We absolutely are. If you talk about people needing a kick in the derriere, the NSA scandal did it. I have not talked to a single person since the story broke last week who is not outraged and angry. I'm getting all these emails from people saying, gee, years ago we thought you were some kind of a kook, and it turned out you were right all along. And that's why it's important that we make this push now to get RBN out there, get the bills caught up, get onto that satellite, get the other stations there. We've only got a few minutes left in this segment. What can people do to help?
Well, simply pick up the phone. This is even a toll-free call for you, 800-724-2719. Just call that number. One of the people here will answer that phone. Make a donation. Or go up to our website, republicbroadcasting.org. Right at the top, There's a PayPal button, a donate button. Hit that. Just don't do American Express. Okay, every other card we can take, but just don't do American Express. Or if you want to remain anonymous or use the snail mails in light of all this snooping and pooping going on, that's fine as well. Just simply make out the envelope to RBM 2251 Double Creek Drive, that's 2 words, Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas. 2 words again, folks. Round Rock, Texas, 78664. Check, money orders, FRNs wrapped in foil, we don't care. So, there's many different ways that you can do this, but I've made the pledge, Mike, years ago that I'm not getting rich off of this doggone thing. I think I made $18,000 out of this network last year.
Well, that's
smoking.
Nobody here is doing this to get rich. If we wanted to be rich, we'd be over at the television network saying, yes, folks, everything is just fine and hunky-dory, go back to work. For those of you who did not have your pencils handy, you can go to the Republic Broadcasting website, and up at the top you'll see this little word contact, where it'll open up a page where you will see the address and the phone number, and so you can always get that information there. And again, we rely on you. This is a radio network to restore the Republic for the benefit of the American people, and we need your help to do it, because obviously the money junkies, they're not going to help us at all. They want us to dry up and blow away, like so many of our fellow networks have already done. And the only thing that's going to keep us alive is we need your help. We don't need you to grab a musket and go shoot the British, but we do need you to reach into your pocket and help RBN continue into the future to keep on getting the word out. We got to take a break for commercials here. Thank you, John, for spending some time with us today, and we will be right back.
Thank you, Michael.
America, welcome back to the show. And, in all honesty, I have a real hard time asking for money. I'm terrible at it. It's probably why I'm going to die broke. And I know the same is true for John, but we really do need to make that outreach right now, because we're in a fist fight. We're in a war for the soul of what America is supposed to be, to restore the Republic, to pull this country back from the talons of the money junkies. And it's a war between us and the 1%. The 1%ers have got pretty much all the money. And they're keeping it to themselves, and they're showering it over anybody who will make them richer still. And that's why we have to come out here and get on our knees and beg every once in a while. So anyway, now getting back to the war zones, there's been another attack up in Afghanistan. We talked about yesterday this bombing in front of the Supreme Court killed 17 people. Why all of a sudden is this surge of violence in Afghanistan? Is the Taliban really tired of the U.S. and wants them to go? Quite probably. But there's another explanation we should look at. This is 2013. Next year is 2014. The year Obama promised he was going to bring your sons and daughters home from Afghanistan. But he doesn't want to do that. There's still plenty of oil to be harvested in Afghanistan and sold only for U.S. dollars. There's still plenty of opium poppies in Afghanistan to provide raw material to American drug lords. Obama doesn't really want to bring our kids home from Afghanistan. And especially yesterday's bombing where they said, oh, it was a suicide bomber. Actually, the photo shows it was a truck bomb. And so we may be well looking at more false flag attacks so Obama can come up and say, well, I really meant to bring your children home from Afghanistan, but we have to stay there to keep the peace. A peace that U.S. and Israeli covert operatives are probably breaking. For that very reason. Remember back during the invasion of Iraq when they were out there saying we have to be in control of the place to keep the violence down, and they caught those British SAS guys with Muslim clothing and bombs in their car, and the Iraqi police arrested them, and before they could be questioned, the British Army literally attacked the Iraqi police station to free these guys. That's how they work. They create the problems, then offer to sell you a solution to them. It's called the Hegelian dialectic. Same thing with global warming. Oh, there's a problem we just made up out of a clear blue sky, quite literally in this case, and we will sell you a solution. By the way, story just came out here. Apparently, there has been a very covert attempt, well, actually they succeeded, to raise the carbon taxes that the Obama administration is planning. Apparently, the Congress just passed a change in the rules regarding microwave ovens, but buried in that was an increase on the price of carbon taxes. And of course, this whole carbon tax thing, it is a scam. And I'm still seeing the government shills out there saying, oh yes, the world is getting warmer. Trust us, forget all about that snow and ice out there. Global warming leads to snow and ice. The polar bears are drowning. The Arctic ice is melting. You're all going to die unless you give us your carbon money. And they're still raising on this busted flush. And the government's just going to go ahead as if global warming was real and it's all the fault of human beings and they've got to tax you to solve the problem. It's just fraud after fraud after fraud. And the problem here, and the reason why this government is doomed to collapse in the near future, they have run this country with lies and fraud and deception so long, they don't know any other way to do it. They have forgotten how to run a legitimate government and nation. Generations ago. They don't know how to do it any other way. And that's why, like I said on the last segment, the motto of the government is, if at first you don't succeed, lie, lie again. And they're still lying, and they're going to go on lying. They don't know any other way to operate. We'll just tell you what to believe, and you will believe it, and we will then do what we want to do based on your belief. But they can't do it anymore in the age of the internet and the independent media and the blogs. And that's why they're so afraid of it. Trying to shut it down. Trying to find some way. Oh, it's a haven for terrorists and hate speech. And it's all these terrorists are getting their bomb instructions from the internet and we've got to take it over. They're trying to take us back to the Cold War era, where the government would tell the media what to tell you to believe, and then based on that belief, they would send your children to die in these wars of conquest. And they long for those glory days of the Cold War. They want so much to go back. They want to forget about the 21st century. The 21st century sucks from the point of view of the government. They want to go back to the 1950s when everybody believed the propaganda. Apparently, Fox News host Kilmeade has sent a message to that anti-Muslim group in Britain, the EDL, saying, "We got your back." They're just trying, and again, the Nazis did it with the Jews. George Orwell did it with Emmanuel Goldstein. And our governments are doing it with the Muslims. We've got to create an enemy for everybody to be afraid of. And it's all fakes and frauds and deceptions. Hello, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I'm going to talk a little bit about global warming. And last week I talked about this story that came out where they were trying to say, well, the only people questioning global warming are those gosh darn conspiracy theorists. And, of course, now it turns out the conspiracy theorists were right about NSA spying on all Americans, and we're certainly right about so many of these other things we've called attention to. And the attitude from the carbon Nazis is, well, you're still a kook and we shouldn't listen to you, and we believe in global warming, and we believe you should pay carbon taxes, and we believe you should let us tell you how to live your lives. And I'm still, just because I like pricking the trolls every once in a while, I'm still engaged in a debate over there at that story, which has descended into ad hominem attacks. I keep posting all these links. I posted the photo of the NOAA weather station set right next to a trash incinerator, and they're coming back saying, oh, you're a kook, you're a nut, you think the government did 9/11, you know, and it's just degenerated into ad hominem attacks, which is basically, it's a white flag of surrender. When they get to that level of screaming names at you, they're waving the flag of surrender. Their position is unsupportable. So we're looking at these news stories here. The Beaufort Sea ice area is way above normal. You know, it's an article of faith in the carbon Nazis or the Goracles or whatever you want to call them, that the Arctic ice is melting and the world is flooding and all the rest of that. And it turns out that the Beaufort Sea ice area has doubled since last year. Doubled. We're not even talking percentage gain and loss. We're talking double. The Arctic ice area this year is 1 million square kilometers larger than this same time last year. And the carbon Nazis are still at it. We saw this article in The Independent about how global warming is threatening the North Sea oil and gas from increasingly intense storms caused by global warming. So they're still trying to raise on this busted flush. And you'd think after several record-setting winters in a row, the carbon Nazis would quit. But no, they see that prize, that money, that carbon taxes and carbon credits, and that those billions of unearned profits just lure them on to greater and greater acts of lunacy here. And a reminder for those of you who actually study real science, severe storms are not caused just by warming. They are caused by a temperature differential. And you can get monster storms just as quickly from upper atmosphere cooling as you can by surface warming. And the proof of that is on the outer gas giant planets here in the solar system. Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus. Satellites show they have monster storms. They're bigger than our entire planet. And yet their temperatures are hundreds of degrees below zero. And all these people who invested their money and their reputations in global warming, they're out there trying to salvage this thing. Or at least salvage their reputation. Yes, I was talking about global warming, and yes, we were completely wrong, but we meant well. And you can still see their hired online propagandists out there trying to shout down anybody who dares to post facts that challenge the revealed dogma that you are supposed to believe in. That's how they rule. Belief. Believe in what we tell you, and all will be well. Believe the economy is improving. Believe the government is honest and only worries about you. Believe that bankers are fair and honest and would never, ever, ever cheat you. And yet, obviously, the evidence before our eyes, ears, noses, is quite to the contrary. And that's why the governments are panicking. There's a crisis of faith. We don't believe the government any longer. We don't believe the corporate media. We're all propaganda heretics. And that's why they're scared. Meanwhile, over in China, they have just launched their latest manned mission to their own space station. Gee, I miss the days when the United States had a manned space program. Remember that time we were reaching for the stars, we went to the moon, we had something to feel proud about? Not anymore. Too busy giving that money to Israel and Wall Street. Shuckies. Governing is choosing. Governing is prioritizing. We got to take your money and we can't spend it on you. Let alone space program. We can't even afford to pay the roads anymore. Or keep the bridges up. You know, we need that money. We've got to prop up that banking system. We've got to show the world that the American banking system is honest and reliable and trustworthy, even if we have to strip mine the people to do it. The system has already failed. It's clearly in its death throes. The people in Sodom on the Potomac and Wall Street, they don't want to give up the party. They don't care what they do. They just want to keep things going just a little while longer. And they don't care how many people they hurt to do it. Like I said, going back to all wars are bankers' wars. And by the way, the video that somebody made out of that broadcast is now up to something like 250,000 views on YouTube. I reposted it to the front page of whatreallyhappened.com to get it out there. But those bankers, those money junkies, have a history of willingness to send hundreds of millions of human beings to death and disfigurement to keep their little scam going, their private central bank issuing the public currency as a loan at interest. Their belief is they're supposed to own all the money. They'll let you play with it for a fee, but it's really all theirs. They own all the money on planet Earth. That's what this is all about. Using America's military might, using your sons and daughters to go after those few countries that won't play the game this way, is to have a world where the private bankers own all of the money. And they'll loan it to you, and it may be in your pocket, but it's not really yours. It still belongs to them. And that's not what the United States is supposed to be about. That's why we fought a revolution. Get rid of the Bank of England. So that the public currency would be a public utility. So that that public currency did belong to the public. To serve them, not be their master. Apparently there has been yet another study published showing that animals are being physically harmed when they are fed food containing GMO content. And let's see, this was published on June 12th, and it showed that pigs being fed on GM products were severely deformed, severe inflammation, 2.6 times more likely to get severe stomach inflammation than control groups on natural food. Just goes on and on and on. More and more of these studies. This stuff is bad. More and more countries are saying, we don't want to have any of it. Monsanto is saying, oh, that's okay if other countries won't buy our stuff. Our government will make sure the American people buy and eat it. And if they get sick, not a problem. We've got a pill to sell them for that one here. A story coming out of, speaking of real estate blogs, and it's talking about these patent trolls. And we know a lot of these patent troll companies have already been shut down by the courts, but they're not going fast enough. And they're talking about this troll company, MPHJ Technology Investments, which has a bunch of front companies called OLED, AdsPro, GanPan, and so forth, and others. And what they do is they have patented some nonsensical ideas, in this particular case, using your scanner to send an email, to scan a document and send it as an email. And a lot of these all-in-one printers come with that function built in. You scan a document, you don't need to go back to your main computer, you can just type in the email address and it will go. And they're claiming this violates their patent. Now, this company doesn't make and sell scanners that send email. They just patented the idea, and they've gone after everybody else to say, you owe us money. And I think when we talk about the blueprint for the new America, and we start looking at patent law, I think we should hold patents as legally binding only if the holder of the patent is actively making and selling the patented product. If they have a patent they're not doing anything with, where's the demonstrated financial harm if somebody else is using that patented product? Patents are not supposed to be there so that somebody can just dream up a bizarre idea, not actually develop it, and then start suing anybody who actually does develop it. And so I think we need to bring that abuse back under control. And the easiest way to do that is say, your patent is legally binding only as long as you yourself are producing that product. Then, of course, yeah, anybody else producing the same product, they're causing you financial harm. But these companies that are set up to simply create ideas and come up with patents and then sue other people. And remember, this idea of sending an email from a scanner didn't originate with this company. It was already in common usage out there. So they literally stole somebody else's idea, put a patent on it because it wasn't patented, and said, now you owe us money. Now, there's an alarming development out there in these so-called disease charities having to do with a concept called venture philanthropy. And that is where these charities that are, say, we are the national, let's make up a disease here, blah, blah, blah. We're here to find a cure for blah, blah, blah. And they raise donations, and they're supposed to be there to help you deal with blah, blah, blah. And they start investing some of their donation money in the pharmaceutical companies developing drugs for blah, blah, blah. And it raises very justifiable concerns over whether their financial ties to this particular pharmaceutical institution will bias their reporting to the public about the latest development in drug blah, blah, blah. It basically makes these disease charities little more than paid, isolated advertisement for the drug companies. And we've seen this before. There was this National Skin Cancer Institute that was out there years back advertising how you've got to have sunscreen on your body to protect against skin cancer. Didn't talk about having a big floppy hat or putting on some kind of a cover-up. No. Their only solution was skin care products here. And it turned out it was financed and developed completely by the Coppertone people. And we see this happen a lot. All right, we're going to grab a call here. Kent in West Virginia. Aloha, Kent. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, that's. I understand your anger about these patent trolls that I'm just learning about, but your solution. I'm an inventor, and believe me, I can tell you I don't like your solution.
Okay.
Because I have patents, and so suppose I get a patent and nobody will license it from me, and all of a sudden I have a patent that I've invested in, and nobody will license it from me and pay me a royalty, and they just go out and produce it. Without acknowledging me, and then I can't sue them. You need. You know
something? You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And we would need to rethink this one.
So they believe me, they do not want to license. They don't even want to talk to inventors in this country anyway. It's extremely difficult. So. Well,
one of the biggest scams we have out there now, we've seen these TV ads where, do you have a great idea? We will help you patent it and develop it. And they wind up, of course, with the lion's share of any proceeds from the development and sale of this idea. And you're absolutely right. I wasn't thinking in terms of actual inventors who lack the financing to go out and develop their invention, and that was a major oversight on my part, so I'll have to rethink that. But we do need to go after these patent trolls who simply come up with an idea that they have no intention of developing and say, we've come up with this idea and you owe us. I used to get into discussions with art directors that I worked with on these various productions I'd worked on, and they were always big fans of Leonardo da Vinci, and we are big fans of Leonardo da Vinci, but they would say, he invented flying because he drew a picture of it. No, he didn't. The Wright brothers did. They made it actually work. And I tend to be sympathetic to those who actually go out, like you do, actually making the thing work. But, in order to have your invention, you probably actually built one, didn't you?
Well, no, sometimes I do.
You built a prototype. I mean, you actually tried to go out and make sure it would work. And you're right. I do need to allow for the small inventor who is not financially supported. But there are these huge abuses of the patent system to make money for people, who had no intentions whatsoever of getting involved in actually making this stuff. And it's just another form of lawyer-based piracy. But the good news is the courts have come in and really tried to deal with this crisis here. But
and another thing you were talking about, these invention promotion organizations, which I was warned about when I first started out. But one thing that's going on, I don't know, one of the biggest scams going on right now is the United States Patent Office itself. Their fees have doubled, like in the last 8 or 9 years, and they're preparing false and misleading documents. And I've been fighting with them for. They were originally in an area around what's called Crystal City, which is just like an office complex, and they moved to a very fashionable part of town, Old Town Alexandria, and their fees have doubled. And they're preparing false, misleading documents that not only mislead me, but mislead reporters from Politico and even the Congressional Research Service. And that's a scam worth being investigated in and of itself.
Well, there are a lot of abuses. I know that there have been many scandals where large corporations have come in to look at patent applications to scam off ideas, and they'll change them just enough to evade the patent and rush them to market. I mean, it's open season on ordinary Americans, and that, of course, is a hallmark of a fascist economic dictatorship where the government and corporations are aligned together against ordinary people. And again, this idea with all this NSA spying, they could be getting into your computers and finding your ideas that you're developing before you can even apply for the patent and sharing them with cronies. I mean, we've all...
Go ahead.
I said, we've all had the experience of having a great idea that we sit and do nothing about it, and then all of a sudden 3 weeks later we see, or 3 months later we see somebody else has come out with the same idea, and we just chalk it up to the fact that we didn't actually get out there and deal with it in time. But we need to start going back and say, how often are our good ideas being siphoned off by this NSA spying and given to cronies out there on the network? And if you go back and you read the book Compromised, Clinton, Bush, and the CIA, the author who wrote it, and I'm blanking on his name right now, openly talks about all the financial economic advantages that you got being part of that intelligence network. Access to contracts, inside information, all kinds of things that made it much easier to become very, very rich. Advantages ordinary citizens were not allowed to have.
they just passed something called the America Invents Act a year or so ago, and I call it the Americans Can't Afford to Invent Act. But incorporated in there is something you can essentially, when you file a patent, you get in the queue and you get examined. But a corporation can pay like $5,000, and they can guarantee that their patent will have be
priority access. I've seen the same thing over at the Copyright Office. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the show. And what Kent was telling us about the expedited processing of the Patent Office, we see that all over the place. I see it over at the Library of Congress, where you register copyrights on music. Now, technically, the copyright exists at the moment of creation, but you go through the registration process in order to avoid disputes over who really created the work. And every one of Claire's pieces of music, I'll go over to the copyright and I'll register it, and there's a $35 fee. And it will take 2 to 3 months, sometimes as long as 6 months, to get your certificate of copyright. But there's a little box on there. If you're willing to spend $750, which is the kind of money we don't have, you can get your copyright certificate the very next day. And so let us say hypothetically that Claire writes a song and the NSA is looking at her work and they say, hey, this is a really good song. I got a friend in a rock band who could turn this into a platinum hit. And they copy off her PDF file of the music, they change the names on it, and they go over to the Copyright Office. And I've already registered for copyright under the normal system where it's going to take 3 to 6 months to get it. And they put in a copyright under their own name on the same piece of music, but they pay the $750 and they get the certificate of copyright first. And they can say, hey, we had it first. That Claire Rivero stole it from us. The system is biased against ordinary citizens. It is biased in favor of those with the money and the power. That is not democracy. It's not republic. It's not the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution. Somebody wrote in and said, we need to go back to the way patents operated before globalism, where the patent goes to the party who did the inventing, not just to the first person to get to that patent office. And there are abuses over all this intellectual property stuff. I remember that scandal a few years back where Jennifer Lopez was marketing her own line of cosmetics under the trademark Glow by J-Lo. And she got sued for trademark infringement because she was spelling glow as G-L-O, and there was a prior trademark that used that. And Lopez went out and found an even earlier company with a trademark and simply bought it outright, including their registered trademark, and then used that registered trademark to sue the company that was trying to sue her. And so there are hideous abuses of this, and it's all that lawyering stuff. And they don't care what's right or wrong or moral or ethical. It's whatever they can grab and get away with. And a nation operating on a principle like that is not a nation that can endure, and that's obviously one of the major reasons we are in the situation we are in right now. And again, it's another reason why we should be very concerned about the government spying on everything that we do. Even if you commit no crime, your intellectual property is exposed for the pilfering of anybody in government who feels they can make a fast buck off of your ideas. Your inventions, your literature, your music, your artwork, your photos. They just caught NSA pirating somebody's copyrighted image for their logo, for Prism. You can't trust this government with your private information. You absolutely cannot. And you should be angry over this government that absolutely, blatantly violates the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. The Constitution, use it or lose it. It's the end of our show. We got to get on out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. So we will be back here tomorrow on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, stay informed. Make good choices. Share what you know with everyone you know. The more you find the courage to speak out, the more you will give others around you the courage to speak out. We are in a fight for the soul of the nation. Talk to you tomorrow. Aloha, America.